All right, everyone, welcome back. This is Timing the ACT Math Test, and we're going to be covering three topics. What score tests you into calculus, how many questions will get you that score, and then how to actually time the math test, okay? We're going to actually look at some example problems. Won't take too long, though, all right? Now, if you're not trying to get into calculus, that's okay. This is just as an example, okay? Here's the thing that you have to know. Each school has a list like this, that a certain ACT score is going to get you into a certain math class. If you notice, a 22, which gets you into UNLV, tests you into elementary algebra. That is lower than your high school courses, okay? And, I don't know about you, but if I go to college, I don't want to redo what I just did in high school. I want to test at the level that I'm supposed to be, okay? Now, if you get all the way to Algebra 2 and pre-calculus, you'll still probably want to test in around the pre-calculus, maybe the pre-calculus trig level, because it is a little bit more difficult in college. But to answer our first question, an ACT score of 28 at UNLV gets you into Calculus 1. Now, if you are a STEM-ish major, you will need to take up to Calculus 1 or even higher. If you are not a STEM major and maybe you want to major in English, right? You could actually, if you tested into calculus, you could be done with math before you even get to college, okay? Now, let's focus on how we get that score. So here we have, many columns, right? We have our English column, our math column, our reading column, our science column, okay? And we're going to be focusing on the math. So you can see the scaled scores here and on the other side, and then approximately the math score that you would need to get that. Now, this was taken from a ACT test given many, many years ago, and these scores will change each year. They have a whole system of scaling the scores based off the difficulty of the test and XYZ, okay? But for the most part, this is about what you would need. It, could be around these same numbers for the test that you take this time, okay? And if you look, a 28 to test into Calculus 1 is only 45 to 46 problems correct, okay? And if you think about that, and if this was a test that you took in my class or in any other math teacher's class, a 45 out of 60, let me use something a little thicker here, a 45 out of 60 is a 75%. That is a C on a test, okay? So you need to kind of rethink what's a good score in this test, right? Let's take a step back. Let's look at something a little bit lower. Let's say you do want to test into that pre-calculus level. Let's look at this 23. Now, this is 2 semesters of pre-calculus, okay? So pre-calculus 1, pre-calculus 2. Pre-calculus and trig is these two combined into a single semester. So let's say you only need a 23, okay? Let's go back here. Here's 23. That's 32 to 33 questions correct. That's just a little bit greater than, well, we don't need the or equal sign, greater than 50% on the test gets you into pre-calc, okay? So if you're like, man, I took that test, I only knew half the questions, I'm feeling really bad. Well, half the questions tests you pretty high, okay? So what's the point that I'm making here, right? The point that I'm making is you don't need 100% on this test. You shouldn't be shooting for 100% on this test. You have 60 questions, 60 minutes. That is a minute per question. And if you treat it a minute per question, you're not going to have enough time, okay? So let's talk about how do we hack this test, okay? Here are 2 strategies that are very common. If you simply do a search online, you're going to see these types of strategies come up. I'm going to walk you through these strategies, but then I'm also going to show you just a little tip, and it's a little, not a loophole in the strategies, but it's a weakness of these strategies, okay? So common recommendations for us for a sub 28 score, okay, is that you take this test in 3 sections, which generally speaking, in fact, that should say third, 20. Generally speaking, the test is organized in this way, that the first 20 questions are going to be the easiest. The second 20 questions are going to be the medium difficulty ones. And then the last 20, the third 20 is going to be the absolute hardest questions on this test. And if you're shooting to get into pre-calculus and you only need 30 questions correct, then you should just be guessing on those last hardest ones and taking your 25% chance that you will get it correctly, okay? And spending more time in the first and second set of problems. Look at this. If you spend 120 seconds now, 2 minutes on the easiest, right? That's half your test time, approximately 120 seconds. If you do approximately 120 seconds for the medium difficulty problems, you would have gotten more time to answer those 40 questions, right? Which if you got all of those correct, you'd be getting close to getting into calculus, right? And then you're just going to guess on that last 20 because they are the hardest. And if you're struggling on those first 40, then chances are you probably won't get those correct, right? So why not spend more time maybe eking out some stuff in this medium range here, okay? Now, your other common recommendations are for a greater than or equal to score of 28. So this is really where, you're shooting to go above calculus, things like that, which of course, again, these recommendations are based off UNLV for that 28, okay? That first 20 questions now, the easiest, you need to be spending less time on them. You cannot be spending more than 30 seconds on those questions because if you do, you will not get any right in the hardest. You will not make it to the hardest questions, okay? You need to be spending about 60 seconds you need about spending 60 seconds on the medium. And then if you did the 30 seconds on the easiest, then the hardest questions, you'll actually get about 1.5 minutes for, okay? Now you may be going, what the heck? I get 120 in this plan. I get 30 in this plan. Yeah. If you're shooting for a score greater than or equal to 20, then these first 20 questions, they need to be easy to you. If they're hard for you, then you should go with this plan on the left, okay? Now, here's the one issue I have with those recommendations. These are questions pulled from a sample ACT test, and they're all questions pulled from what's called the hardest parts, the hardest questions. And if you look at them, they're not that hard. Like, they look scary, but they're not that hard. Look at 56. The graph below shows the distance Malika is from a motion detector for a period of 10 seconds. A certain order of 3 of the following 5 actions describes Malika's movements, right? So we have the distance away from a motion detector. And if let's see, this is what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10. We're 10 feet away. And that distance gets closer, we must be walking towards the motion detector, right? There's nothing advanced about this problem. But you look at this, and there's two. There's toward, right? One's at 4 feet per second, one's at 2 feet per second. So look at your seconds. 1, 2, 3, kind of coming close to 4. Doesn't know if it really makes it to 4. Okay, so we've moved 8 feet in approximately 4 seconds. Well, we're definitely closer to walking at 2 feet per second. Now let's look at our answers. The only one that has the fifth one as the first order is K. I didn't even need to look at the rest of them. We can obviously easily see that this is where they're not moving and they're using the motion detector, and this is where they walk away, but I didn't even need to look at the rest because only one answer had that, and K is the correct answer. A common thing you see on the ACTs, a lot of times you can figure out the answer before you're actually at the finished answer, okay? Look at 48. If n is a positive integer, which of the following expressions must be an odd integer? Okay, so that means that any possible number that you plug in there, you're going to get an odd number, right? Well, clearly it can't be K, because if I put 3, which is a positive integer, I get 6, right? Same thing for J. If I put 6 divided by 3 is 2. Same thing for H. If I put 2, I get 6. Same thing for G. If I put literally any even number there, 2 to the power 3, 2 times 2 times 2 is 8, right? So even if you don't know that F is the correct answer here, you eliminated all the other ones, right? Now maybe that one was a little bit harder to see. Well, let's look at 55. Which of the following is an irrational number that is a solution to the equation, the absolute value of x squared minus 12 minus 4 is equal to 0? Absolute value equations look hard, but they're not. The only difference with an absolute value equation is first you solve for the absolute value. So the absolute value of x squared minus 12 is equal to 4 because you add the 4 to both sides, okay? And then you treat it like it's two equations because the absolute value could be either, the positive or the negative number that came out of there to get you that 4. So we go x squared minus 12 is equal to 4. And then we do a second equation. X squared minus 12 is equal to negative 4. And we solve them both to get both the possible answers. So we add the 12, we get x squared is equal to 16. You square root, you get x is equal to plus or minus 4. However, they said irrational number. 4 is not an irrational number. So add the 12, x squared is equal to 8. You take the square root, you get x is equal to, well, you do your factor tree, 4 times 2, right? We could take the square root of 4, which is 2, and so we get 2 times the square root of 2, which is C. And that is an irrational number because it has a square root of 2 in it, right? Now, do these problems look like they take a little bit more time? Yeah, but they're not that bad, right? And so if you just kind of go, oh, I'm in that last 20, and you just start guessing when there might be some softballs kind of in those last 20, right? So look at this last one here. And the complex numbers where I squared is equal to negative 1. Well, thanks for that info, but we already, if you've been in my Algebra 2 class, I squared is equal to negative 1. So you don't even need to remember that part. It goes 1 divided by 1 plus I times 1 minus I divided by 1 minus I. If you're in my Algebra 2 class, complex conjugate, that's all they did. If you got rid of this piece right here and you had 1 divided by 1 plus I, and I said rationalize this, use your complex conjugate, right? All they did was multiply by the opposite of 1 minus I. Okay, so let's do the math. 1 times 1 and 1 minus I, well, that's just 1 minus I again. Sorry, let me something thicker here. It's just 1 minus I. Okay, and then you have, let's write this over here, 1 plus I. Man, I don't have the right pencil size. Let's go 1 plus, nope, well, we'll deal with it. And then 1 minus I. Okay, and so we multiply, and sorry, I'm like losing my train of thought here because I'm thinking to myself, these are also kind of like your difference of squares where your bx term cancels out. So you could simplify this and already know that your middle term gets canceled out, or you could do it and you get your 1 minus I times plus I times negative I squared, and those cancel. And so on the bottom, you have 1 minus I squared. And if you remember that I squared is the same thing as negative 1, then this becomes 1 minus I over 1 plus 1, right? Because the I squared becomes negative 1, it's a negative negative, and so it's just 1 minus I over 2, and that's it, J. Okay? Now, yeah, these problems are harder than some of the ones you'll see in the first 20, but they're not that bad. So my final recommendation to you is that if you're taking this ACT test and you want a sub-calculus kind of score, if you see a really difficult problem and you've never seen anything on earth like it, skip it. Just skip it right away, because if you can come back to it later, okay? And if you see a problem that you think you can work out, okay, try it, but definitely, I like to make 3 passes through the test. I like to go through and answer the softballs, okay? Go through and answer all the easiest questions. Then I'm going to go through and answer the ones that I think I can work out. And then when I'm like 3 minutes away from finish, I'm going to guess on what's ever left, okay? So that I make sure whatever the hardest problems were, I'm guessing on, okay? Because, truth be told, what makes a problem hard is that you don't know what to do, right? Number 1 could be hard to you if you don't know what to do on number 1, right? So these are guidelines, okay? So hopefully that kind of illuminated some things about the Math ACT test, and I will see you guys next time.